Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Piyush and this is video number 13 in the series Azure DevOps Zero to Hero. And in this video, we'll be discussing all about Azure Function, what it is, how do we implement CI/CD to it, and we'll be doing this with the help of an example application that's been created by our guest for today, and I will introduce him in a bit. So without any further ado, let's go to the GitHub repository with the agenda and then we'll start the video. Right, here's my GitHub repository and I have scrolled down to the section where it says day 13 serverless app CI/CD. Right, so as I've said, we start with Azure Function introduction, then we'll see a brief use case and benefits of an Azure Function. I promise it's gonna be a short summary and we'll be mostly focusing on the demo. Rishabh, our guest for today, if you don't know him, I believe you probably would have seen his YouTube videos. He's an amazing content creator and he works as a DevRel with 𝗏𝗏 Canada at the moment. And he has amazing experience with DevOps, Kubernetes, and lots of other cool technologies. So he'll be helping us with this project that he built some time back. And on my request, he created that project for Azure Function. Earlier, it was created for AWS Lambda, but then he created that in Azure as well. So thank you for that, Rishabh. And then we'll be looking into how do we create the function, how do we deploy it locally using CLI tools, and how do we publish it to Azure using CLI tool. And finally, we'll be looking into how do we create an end-to-end CI/CD pipeline in Azure to deploy the function to Azure. So we'll start with the introduction of Azure Function. So let's start with our first topic. Let's quickly see what exactly is Azure Function. Azure Function is an event-driven serverless compute service. Now let's have a look at each of these one by one. So event-driven means it is executed based on certain events, such as you want your function to be executed as soon as there is a file uploaded to the Azure Blob storage. That is why it is called event-driven. There are different type of events that it supports. So it could be a HTTP based event, or it could be a time based event like execute this function at the certain time at a certain day, such as like a cron syntax, or it could be message from other service like Azure Event Grid or Azure queue storage and so on. Serverless means like for your virtual machines and your containers, these are also the compute service. So to run these type of services, you need to have an underlying VM. That VM has to be running in order to execute your code, in order to make your website or your application accessible to the user. But as your Azure Function is serverless, that means you don't need to manage an underlying virtual machine or underlying infrastructure to run your Azure Functions. So for example, let's say you have a user and this user uploaded a file to Azure Blob storage. Just consider this blob storage is an Azure storage to store binary large objects such as images, files, log files, text files, all those things. So it is similar to AWS S3 if you have worked with AWS before. Let's say the user uploads a file to this and you want, as soon as there is a file uploaded to this Azure Blob storage, there is an email that is triggered after this particular event. So this file upload is a event. As we have seen that Azure Function is event driven, so this is kind of a trigger to this Azure Function, and Azure Function will be watching this Azure Blob all the time, right? And as soon as it finds that event, as soon as it finds that trigger, it executes that Azure Function and triggers the email. So that is how Azure Function works. Now I have also created another video, like an in-depth video about Azure Function. If you want to look into it, feel free to check that out, and I will put the link in the description section as well as up somewhere in the title bar. So have a look at that. And Azure Function has a lot of benefits over Azure virtual machines or containers. First is it is cost effective, as you don't have to manage the infrastructure, plus the virtual machine is not running all the time, and it saves all the cost. You only pay for the number of code executions. So in Azure Function, you write your piece of code and you get charged based on the number of times the code get executed. It also provides faster response than Azure virtual machines or containers, but it is used only in cases where your application shouldn't be running all the time and it is event driven. Right? You want your function to be executed based on certain events or based on certain time of the day, like a cron job. But the execution is really fast. And it is also highly scalable. That means it can support a large number of requests from the upstream system. And it is really flexible, like you can do a lot of things with it, because you can choose your own programming language and you can write code as per your requirement. Right? So this is how it works.
All right, so we have Rishabh with us today. Rishabh will be helping us with this particular project end to end. This is, as I've already mentioned, this is day 13 of Azure DevOps Zero to Hero. And this series will be about Azure DevOps, Azure services, and everything in Azure. And Rishabh has bought us an amazing project, which is QR code generator. And I will leave everything for Rishabh to explain. So, Rishabh, over to you. First of all, thank you very much for joining us, and thank you for giving us time and helping everyone with this amazing learning opportunity. Over to you,
No,
Rishabh.
thank you, Piyush, for having me on the channel. Yeah, this is the second time I think.
I guess
um,
third time. Like we did one live
we did a
stream,
live stream,
and
yes,
yeah, and then there was one podcast that we did together, and yes, this is the third time. But this is the first time that we are doing the actual project demo,
yes.
and I'm really excited for that.
No, for sure, yeah. Yeah. So today I'll be talking about all things serverless. Another buzzword that you might have heard on either Twitter, X, or whatever you call it nowadays, or LinkedIn. And yeah, I'm going to talk about what serverless is to start with and what are some of the benefits of using serverless. And then we are going to dive a little bit deeper on the project itself. So yeah, starting with serverless, pretty self-explanatory word. Basically, it doesn't mean serverless like you don't have no servers. You still have servers that are running in the cloud. It just means that you don't have to worry about servers, hence the term serverless. So it's a cloud computing model, just like we have seen with other services, right? And what it does is it allows developers and engineers to run their code without worrying about the underlying infrastructure or servers. So let's say you are a Python developer and you want to do some event driven, you have some use case of event driven project that you're building. You very well can use serverless and not worry about the infrastructure or where you want to host your Python server. Maybe it's a Azure VM, calculate sizes of those VM and how much compute power do you need. So all of those decision making things are being abstracted away. So now you just have to write code and deploy it to Azure Functions, which I was going to come to the next. So Azure Functions is Microsoft Azure's offering for serverless computing. And it currently, so I've worked with C#, JavaScript, and Python, but I think it supports one other language. I just don't
I guess
remember.
Node.js
Yeah, so
maybe.
you can learn more about it on the Azure's documentation about Azure Functions, but it also supports integrations with other Azure services like blob storage, Cosmos DB, which is your NoSQL database, queue tables. So it has built an ecosystem where if you are storing your data in one of the Azure services, it's very easy to work with those services within Azure Functions. So it really helps you integrate all the services without managing any servers is the point of serverless.
That's beautifully explained. Thank you, 𝗓𝗑𝗃, for the explanation. So maybe we can talk a little about, yes, definitely we'll be jumping right into the demo. But before that, I just wanted to give a brief overview to our viewers who are new to Azure Functions or serverless in total. So what are some of the use cases of a serverless? Like some of the places where serverless will be the right choice and some of the places where it cannot be, an ideal choice.
Yeah, so I think where I have used serverless is, and this is coming from like a practical point of view. This was at a company that I used to work for. We did some, I can't go into much details, but basically we did some data processing, right?
Yep.
So we have huge amount of data, which was in either your blob storage or your Azure storage account, or in tables, within tables in either SQL or it could be non-structured. So it doesn't matter where the data resides, but we had to do some processing as that data came in. And this was an internal app, right? So in order to do that processing, we used, serverless model. So as soon as the data was uploaded or a new entry was made on the storage side, the serverless function would get triggered. As soon as that was done, it would do what it was supposed to do. So let's say you need to filter out any of the, for example, you need to filter out any of the abusive words that might be in a document, right? It would do that, save that file, and then would send a message saying that, hey, I processed, this document, and the user would receive that message too. And you would have a new document now that was again stored in some kind of backend. So that was the use case. And that is the extent of how much I can go into detail with that.
I mean, you have explained it. I guess you have given the idea like what we were talking about. So is it fair to say that anything that is event driven or that needs some sort of processing once the event is generated is an ideal use case for using the serverless?
Yeah, definitely. So that's where the term triggers come into Azure Functions. So this is specifically for Azure Functions, but think of triggers as events, right?
Yep.
So let's say, like I said, if a new entry is created in Cosmos DB, hey, I want you to trigger this job. If something happens in Q, I want to trigger this job. The job resides in Azure Function as a serverless function. And then similarly, you can have HTTP triggers, which gives you the ability to create your own APIs that can live on the internet, and you can do get, post, all those HTTP requests to your serverless function, which again is a trigger and an event that is happening, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah.
So that's what we wanted to know. What are some of the anti-patterns of using serverless? So let's say if I want to host a static website, like it has to be running all the time. Would it be a good candidate for serverless, or is it even possible to use serverless in those cases?
There are services. So again, going back to the concept itself. So serverless doesn't mean it basically means you are not managing servers, right?
Yes.
So any services that offer that, it will be considered serverless, right? So like static web apps, right? You don't manage any servers or underlying infrastructure. You select the plan you want, and you just tell it that, hey, this is my website code. Can you host this for me? And it'll do that for you. Things like 𝗓𝗏 and Netlify, right? But specifically for Azure Functions, I think there are some challenges, right? So if you are scared about cold starts. So cold starts is a term that, since the serverless function is not running 24/7, it only gets, the function gets triggered, or whenever there is an event, that's when it starts. And depending on how huge is your serverless function, you can run into cold starts. So cold starts is basically it takes some time to warm
the
up
initial
the
delay.
function.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. It is also stateless, so they don't persist any data between consecutive runs. So you need to consider, like you'll have to find a way that you're storing that state, or if the data is necessary, somewhere else. So like once a function runs and you run it again, it won't have the history of what happened previously, right?
Yep.
There are also timeout limits, right? So you can only run a function for, X amount of minutes. You can't just leave it running. Again, if that was the case, you would use something. You would use like a different service,
Sure.
if that's your use case.
Yep.
Yeah, and like with event-driven architecture, this really helps with things like I said, data processing. So
Yes.
the project that we'll build today is basically generating QR codes. So we know that once the user submits a URL, we need to create a QR code, save it, and that's it. So we don't need the function running for like
Sure.
24/7.
So it has to be like it basically triggers the function based on an event. So
Yes.
that's what we'll be doing. Okay, that would be a good way to introduce your project now. So maybe we can start with your project. Do you want to share your screen, and we can go from there?
Sure. Let's do that.
Okay, let me. Okay, yeah,
Awesome.
yeah.
Okay. So I know this can be very overwhelming because you're looking at this huge text
Maybe
file.
we can
which
start with
is-
the architectural diagram that you have in your
Oh,
GitHub
sure, yeah.
repo. Yeah. So that
Yes,
we'll
and-
just give a brief introduction about the project to the viewers, and then we can look further into it.
That is a good point. Okay. So I'm gonna open my GitHub repo here, and which will probably link down below. So here is
all the URLs, everything will be there in the description section, and I will share all the details tab in the GitHub repo that I'm maintaining for Azure DevOps course. So this all will be provided. Yeah. Please go ahead.
Yeah, so here's the QR code generator and the architecture of what it will look like. So we have users that will do, again, if you have worked with APIs, you know what a GET request is. It's basically you requesting a resource. So we'll do a GET request to the Azure function with the URL. So we'll generate the QR code for the URL. So the user needs to give us the URL with their request. That will trigger our Azure function. The QR code will be generated by the Azure function and will be stored in the blob storage. This blob storage is publicly accessible, right? So it'll respond back with a URL for the QR code. So QR codes are stored as PNG files in our case. So it'll reply back with a PNG file which is hosted in the cloud. That URL is then sent back to the user with a status code of 200 if everything went well. So that's basically a very simple kind of architecture for which I would consider as like the back end of generating QR codes, right? You can build like a front end on top of this where users can go to a website and generate QR codes, and this Azure function can handle that. But this specifically works as an API for now.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so few things I would suggest if you're trying to build something with Azure Functions. One of them is the Azure Function Core Tools, which is like a command line tool that you can install. It'll help you develop Azure Function locally before you have to deploy it to the cloud, right? So that's what I'm doing here. I have, as you can see, I have a few different files on the right-hand side that was generated by the core tool CLI. And then what I have done is I've edited the index.js where your function code basically resides. So usually there's an example of hello world here. So I have gone ahead and edited it to my needs of generating the QR code. So we'll go over to that. So just to go over the file structure here. So QR code generator is my function app name. And then I have an HTTP trigger. Remember, I was telling you about different trigger types you can have. So in my case, I want users to be able to trigger this function over the internet with HTTP requests. And the generate QR code is the HTTP trigger, which has this index.js. Okay, so we'll start on the top, I guess. As you can see, the const QR code require QR code. So QR code is a library that you can install from npm, which is the node package manager. And I'm using, as you can tell by the extension, I'm using JavaScript today. So QR code lets you write text data or strings into the QR code, right? So we need that. We also need blob service client. So I'm requiring Azure, which is again an npm package available to you, /storage-blob. This will allow us to connect to the storage account where we'll be storing all these QR codes. And then we have the first kind of function here. You can see I'm doing the export to asynchronous function. And I'm logging that we are generating the QR code. I'm going to zoom out. So right here, you can see that we do require URL, and we are taking that URL from the user request. So when the user does a GET request, we are looking for a field or a parameter called URL and what the value of that is. If it doesn't exist, I'm just logging it as a status code of 400 and saying that please pass a URL on the query string or in the request body. Because if we don't have a URL, we can't generate a QR code. This is where kind of the magic happens. So we are writing the URL into a QR code, right? And then we are uploading that to the blob storage by using the connection string. This connection string needs to be saved as an environment variable within your function app. But in order to run this locally, because I'll be demonstrating this to you through CLI, I have the connection string in the local.settings.json, which I'm not clicking on it because I don't want to reveal my connection string. So once you have saved that connection string, you should be able to connect to your blob service client. In my case, I have a container called QR-codes within my Azure storage account. So make sure whatever the container name is in your Azure storage account, it is same here. But I also have a method here that if the container does not exist, it'll create this container for me. Just trying to handle any errors that might come in. Also, I realized pretty soon that I needed to have some regular expressions or regex in place to give the QR code image a name that made sense. So what I'm doing here is I am modifying the URL to remove HTTPS and any of the colons, backslashes, and I'm giving the image a name of whatever the URL is. So let's say you send in a request for HTTPS 𝗏𝗔𝗄𝗎𝗆𝗏𝗏.com. The image will be 𝗏𝗔𝗄𝗎𝗏𝗏.com.png, basically. That's what we are doing here. And then what we are doing is we want to get the URL. Remember that architecture diagram we had? So we need to return the blob storage URL, which is the URL where the image is stored. So that is what we are doing here. Whatever the upload was, I am returning that blob client .url, which will be the URL, as the body with a status code of 200. And this is this entire thing is the response. So we are handling one error, which is if the user doesn't send us a URL, it'll say, please pass a URL as a string. If the URL is there, we'll generate the QR code and send back the blob storage URL.
Okay.
And if there's any other errors, we'll just log it as 500 and whatever the error message is. So status code 500 is for APIs when there's an internal server error. So that's what we are sending back. So that is basically the Azure function itself from the code perspective.
That's pretty amazing, and you have explained it beautifully. The only thing that I wanted to ask, like you mentioned in the beginning when you started the demo, like you can generate this application structure. Like for example, you are using an HTTP trigger, so you used some Azure function CLI to generate that. So maybe
Yes,
like can you just quickly show like what this is, like how to use that to generate the directory structure?
for sure. Yeah. So this is the tool that I was talking about,
Okay.
right? And you can see, so first of all, you'll need to install the Azure Functions core tools. And I can zoom in. So there you go. So this is the command to initiate a new project with the structure that I had. So you basically do func init, whatever your folder is, and worker runtime in our case, it was JavaScript. So maybe you are a C# person, or maybe you want to do this same thing in Python. So you can specify that right over here. And then few things have changed. So they have a newer model now within the the repository structure or the file structure within the project. So I'm still using model 3, the file structure that I shared, but you can use model 4, but it'll look different than what was in mine.
Sure.
And going over the HTTP trigger. So this is, once you have created the project, you will do function new template HTTP trigger and whatever the name of that HTTP trigger is. So in my case, it's generate QR code. And that's why you see a folder called generate QR code. But similarly, you can create a trigger for Azure Queue Storage. And there are multiple triggers that, are supported by Azure Functions. But yeah, we'll link this down in the description of the video. But I don't know if I should still demo creating like a function from scratch.
No. That won't be
minutes
necessary. Yeah, we
if
can just resume where we left off.
Okay, cool. So I'll open the terminal here, and function core tools basically also allow you the ability to run it locally. So it'll be very close to how it will function in Azure, right? So as you know, it's func. So I want to make sure I'm in the right directory first. So QR code generator is my function directory. You don't need to be in the HTTP trigger directory. Make sure you're in the function app. And then you can basically do func start, which will start your function, and you'll see some output here, right?
Yeah.
And you can see that the function found there was one trigger, which was generate QR code. It accepts get and post request on this URL. So I'm gonna copy that. Head over to Postman or any of the API testing tools that you might like. Postman also has a VS Code extension, so you could use that. So now I have my function HTTP trigger here. So if I do a GET request, let's see what happens. So we got a 400 bad request, right? Because we were missing the URL. So it says, please pass a URL on the query string or in the request body, which means the first logic of our function is working. Now we can add the URL as a parameter, and we'll go with Let's go with 𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃.com. Sure, why not? Do a GET request again.
Yep.
And now you'll see that we are getting
And
a
that was
200
fast.
OK.
that was super fast.
Yeah, so this is
314.
314 milliseconds is the time it took to generate the QR code and also reply
And
back.
most of the time, and out of this 314 millisecond, most of the time I believe would be the cold start time. Right? The execution time is even lesser than that.
Yeah, we'll see the difference because
Sure.
this is still local, right?
Yeah. Oh,
This is not in Azure.
It is local.
So it's
yes,
on my
correct.
machine. But it was able to upload the image to Blob very quickly and give us back this URL.
Okay.
Which if I do a control and click, I don't think anybody saw that, but on my browser window, it just downloaded
PNG file.
the 𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃.png.
Okay.
So this was the PNG that was downloaded. I can, people can try this out.
Yeah.
Go ahead and scan this.
Yeah,
It should take you to
maybe I can do that. I can do that. Why not? So let me open my camera app. And all right, so I can put that in front of the. Oh.
Yes. There we go.
Yeah.
Awesome.
There it is. Amazing.
So yeah, again, I know that this project itself can be improved because here I'm just giving a response in JSON. That QR code URL is here. You can definitely, give some other details within your response here, but it works to my expectations, and I'm really happy with it.
Yeah.
The other cool thing
this is amazing. Yeah.
function core tools allow you to do is publish your locally running function to Azure.
Yeah, maybe we can do that if we have time. Can we do that?
I'll have to create a function app before.
Okay.
So you see how it says sign into Azure. I don't know why I haven't. Maybe it signed me out, but basically make sure you're logged into Azure. So like AZ login, right?
Yep.
And then make sure you're in the right tenant, right subscription, create the function app name, and then just do publish. So that it will, it's very easy to develop Azure Functions locally and have them
publish directly to the Azure Function app.
Exactly. Yeah. So I do want to make sure. I think I already have something published. So if I log into my Azure account, and I think the docs go over it. So yeah, right here, it says publish to Azure. So the command is func Azure function app publish, and then whatever the function app name is. So make sure you do have a function app already in the correct resource group. So all the infrastructure needs to be in place before you can deploy it, which is where I know Ԥ𝗚𝗚 will come and help you later with the DevOps practices, which will allow you to automate all of this. So let's go to QR code generator. Yeah, I already have something that's
awesome. So we can see the function live running on Azure Function app.
Yes. So this is the QR code. I'll get the function URL, which is this. We can go to Postman, create a new request, paste that in here. Do you have a URL that you want a QR code for?
No, that's okay. You can put something random.
Let's go with blog.𝗏𝗃𝗀𝗃.com. Do a send. So this is what the cold starts are.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still not that bad, like 4.7 seconds. And yeah, so can we see how much time it actually took for the execution, excluding the cold start time?
Yeah.
So we can do.
There are definitely application insights, I think, is a way to
Okay.
look at it. But
Okay.
I'll show you a quick thing here. So now that our function is ready, like, because maybe nobody was triggering it for a while. If I do anything, let's say, let's go with Microsoft.com. So remember, it took 4.7 seconds, right?
Sure. Oh, it was showing the time. Oh, yeah. This is even better than when you were running it locally. It was 314
Yeah.
millisecond at that time. So yeah, this is
So,
pretty amazing.
and once it's like running, you can keep doing this for like as many times as you want. It'll be like fast.
Yeah. So this cold start time that Rishabh mentioned, so this is one of the limitations of using serverless. And there are ways we can overcome this limitation. For example, I remember I have heard something that AWS recently launched with AWS Lambda to avoid the
Yes.
cold start, or at least it reduce the cold start time. So I believe it will improve over the time, but whatever it is now, it is pretty amazing.
Definitely. So inside your HTTP trigger, you can click on monitor, and this is also where it'll tell you like the failed. So here you can see error. So maybe
Yep.
This specific one is, I think, me just testing few things out with my front end that I was saying I want to build. But you can also see it here that we got a 400 because nobody passed, or somebody didn't pass the URL.
The URL. Yeah.
And then you have successes, but you also see the duration here, right?
Sure.
But there have been cases where it was 40 milliseconds, 39 milliseconds, 38.
Yeah, because once
So-
it was already started, it took
Exactly.
lesser
So
time.
you can see the first one being
Yeah.
bigger, and then it just drops down. And then again, nobody uses it for a day or two.
Sure.
Same thing happens again. But yeah, that was basically the project.
So by any
itself.
chance, like you mentioned, you were building front end for it. Like, does it have any front end at this moment or no?
By like deployed?
Yeah. Yeah. Like
No.
is it no? Okay. Okay.
So
Okay.
I haven't deployed it to Azure, and maybe this is where you can come in and help me. I do have the web app ready. So this is my GitHub for this project. We were in the QR code generator earlier. But the web app is the directory where all the front end code is. And basically it's ready. So it is talking to the function within Azure. It's just that I only have it locally running. I haven't deployed it to Azure yet.
Okay. So let's say, because I don't want to take a lot of your time, so maybe like I'll take your leave now after this, and then I'll continue with the Azure DevOps part of it. So I just wanted to ask, so if I want to deploy this function and Azure DevOps using Azure DevOps pipeline, so what would be the step that I will be following?
So I'm gonna be honest. I don't know.
Okay.
What I'm using right now, which you can also see is failing for some reason. I'm using GitHub Actions, right?
Okay.
The function builds are working. So
Okay.
every time I do a push to my GitHub repo, so let's say I was telling, as I was mentioning in the beginning, right? I could make this better response, just then responding the URL itself, maybe include a message, right? And also handle some of the more errors, because we only have one
Yeah,
catch
that's
here.
okay. Yeah, understand. Yeah.
So let's say I improve this API and I just do Control S and push to my GitHub account. It will be automatically updated in Azure by using this GitHub action, which basically what you will build in Azure DevOps. So to answer your question, I don't know how to do it in Azure DevOps. But I do
No,
know how.
like what I mean by that, so the GitHub action code, I guess it will be part of your repository that is available publicly, right?
Yes.
the YAML for. Okay, so that's what I wanted to know, because the reason why I am asking this, yeah, that should be okay.
Yeah.
That's all good. I'll take care of it.
Awesome.
So yeah, anything else that you would like to share, or maybe you would like to say?
No, thank you for having me and like letting me showcase this project. But yeah, I'm really eager to see how it gets deployed using Azure DevOps, and like how the
Yeah.
CI/CD will work.
Yeah,
So that would be
even I
interesting
am.
to see.
So this will be my first time as well deploying Azure Function using Azure DevOps pipeline. So I am pretty excited, and like whatever we have learned so far, I personally believe that it will be helpful for all the viewers that are watching this video. And I got to learn many new things about Azure Functions. Like I created one video, like one Azure function based project a long time back, and it was basically streaming the logs to Azure Blob Storage.
Oh,
I
cool.
was not using the Azure monitoring or Azure analytics for it, but it was through a third-party tool called Vector. But at that time, I didn't know that we also have a CLI through which we can, generate the function locally and then push it directly to Azure Function. I created everything manually from the Azure portal itself. So
Oh
yeah,
yeah,
that's
that's
yeah.
that was
it
my
it, it
first time
makes
too. Like I
yeah, so it makes life easy, like having such a cool utility in place. Yeah, so it was an amazing learning experience for me as well, and I'm sure it was for everyone else who's watching. So thank you so much, Rishabh, for sharing this amazing project with us. And I will make sure to include all the links in the GitHub repository in the description as well. And I'll let you go now, but thank you once again, and talk to you soon. Thank you so much.
no, thank you.
Alright, so I'll be following this GitHub repository by Rishabh, the one that he just showed. So we'll start with cloning the repository using git clone command. I'll copy it from here, and here's my terminal window on the left side. So you can use VS Code or Git Bash or Putty or any other tool that you like. So it should have some prerequisites, like it should have Node.js install, should have Azure Function core tool install, Azure CLI, as well as your account should be authenticated with Azure using AZ login command, and Azure Blob Storage. This will create, so don't worry about this one. Right? If you want to know how to install this Azure function, so it is already hyperlinked, so you can open this link, and there are instructions separately for Windows, Mac, and Linux. Feel free to follow that. Right? So I have already installed that. I'll just start with cloning the repository, and yeah, it did the cloning. So let me do an ls. Okay, maybe just clear the screen, and all right, so let me do ls over here. So it has this folder, generate QR code. It has host.json, package.json, and package.json. Right now we'll be doing npm install to install all the dependencies. So npm install, and it will take a few seconds to install all the dependencies. All right, this is done. Okay, so now we have to create this file, local.settings.json. So it will have your storage connection string over here and over here as well. So make sure you copy this file so that this file can be referred later by the Azure function in the form of app settings. I'll show you how it's done. Let's just skip this step for now, and I will show you after that, because Rishabh already shown us how do we run it locally. And now I'm going to show you how do we deploy it to Azure. But before that, we have to create the Azure function from the portal itself. So let me go to Azure portal over here, and let's go to Azure Function. Okay, hit create. Okay, and create a new resource group. Let's call it Day-13 demo RG. Okay, and give this function app a name. Call it Day-13 demo app. Okay, and select a runtime stack. For us, it's gonna be Node.js. and let's select the version 18 because this is what he used to build the app and this is what we have tested it on already. And we'll keep the region as default East US and we'll select the operating system as Windows. So there are some differences between Windows and Linux based operating system because Windows has more feature. You can do a lot more with Windows, like logging to the console and a few other things. So because this is a Microsoft based application, so they provided more support for Windows. So you can select this one or you can go with Linux if you want. That's not a problem. Then we have hosting options and plans. So we have three hosting options. One is consumption, which is the serverless option. So I've tried this one already, but it does not have any environment up and running all the time. So it will provision a serverless based environment instantly and execute your function with the cold start, of course. And it is you basically get charged based on the number of code execution, right? But it has some limitation, like Azure only provides you 1 GB of storage associated with it, and your Azure file has been mounted as the storage for this. So there are some limitation, and in this case, like the build size, when we run npm install, so it created a node module folder with all the dependencies, and the size exceeds 200 MB, and it is just not enough for this function to run. I have already tried it. I was facing the disk space issues, so that's why I have moved with app service plan. Right? App service plan provide you a fully isolated and dedicated environment, and you can run multiple web application and functions as well with this particular app service plan, right? So it's not just for this function. You can run multiple other functions as well as multiple other web apps, but it is not covered in free tier. It has a cost associated with it. So if you are following along with me, use this with caution. Or you can go with the serverless, and maybe you can choose a different app. If you don't want to use this QR code generator app, you can pick any simple application, right? Which does not have a huge build size. So I'm gonna go ahead with this. It will create an app service plan, and I'm using this pricing plan, standard S1. Okay. Then let's go to next, storage. We definitely need a storage account. This storage account will be used to fetch the metadata for this Azure function, as well as will be storing the blobs generated by our QR code generator app. So basically the PNG files will be stored in this storage account. So we'll create a new one. The reason why I would recommend creating it from here, because if you create from the portal itself, it will create an Azure storage account with V2 version, right? But V2 is not supported with Azure Functions, so I would highly recommend creating it from here. Otherwise, you will run into the issues. Don't configure diagnostic settings for now and hit networking. Make sure it has public access enabled. Only then you will be able to run it publicly over the web browser or from any API client. Let's hit next. And I don't want application insight for now. If we face any issue, we can enable it always later on to debug the issues. But for now, just keep it no to save some cost. Then hit deployment. Disable GitHub action because we'll be using Azure DevOps CICD. So yeah, let's disable it. Tag, review and create, and hit create. Now, once this deployment has been completed, it will create 4 resources for you. One is a resource group, then an app service plan, then Azure Function, and a storage account. So make sure these 4 resources are created for you, and it will take few seconds depending on how much time app service plan takes. So I'm gonna pause the recording till then. Alright, it says your deployment is complete. So let's hit over here, go to resource, and here is our function app. So scroll down to the section where it says configuration, click over there, and you will see a few values that's been created for you because we have created Azure Function. So these few app settings have been created for you already, and rest will be pushing from the CLI tool. I will show you that. Okay, so let's go back to our terminal window, and now we'll be pushing that Azure Function to our Azure subscription. So before that, we need to create one more file. So if you remember the documentation over here. It says create this particular file, local settings.json, which will have our app settings. So I'll just copy this, create a new file, local.settings.json. I'll paste the content and I will update the storage connection string over here and over here Azure Web Storage as well. So I'm going to pause the recording till I make the change. Alright, so I have made the changes to my local settings.json file, and if you are wondering from where did I get the connection string, so if you go to resource group, your resource group, and then the name of your storage account that was just provisioned, in that on the left side there is a blade called security plus networking and then access keys, and I've got the connection string from here. You can just click on show, which I'm not gonna do now, but you can click on show and copy the connection string, paste it in the file at both the places that I've just shown, and that's about it. Now the next command that you need to run is to push the Azure function to Azure. So running locally, this we have already seen, and this is what I'm gonna copy now, and we'll just paste it. I have to update the function name, so it was Day-13 demo app, and hit enter. Says your Azure function app has worker runtime set to node while your local project is set to none. Anyways, let's run force on this. Okay, this time it did not throw the error because we have used force, so that's okay. And now let's publish the app settings as well. So this file over here, local settings.json, because it has some confidential data, it has your connection strings, which is basically a secret access key to your storage account. So that's why it's never been pushed to the repository. It's part of your gitignore file as well as this function ignore. So to bypass that, so that our settings are updated in Azure function, what we can do is we can publish this as app settings. So the command for that is the same command that we did, but after that we'll use one more parameter which says publish settings only. So I'll just copy it and then paste it over here. So don't worry, these commands will be there in the GitHub repository of Day-13 folder. So yeah, so that's what it says. It says function worker runtime has been updated, storage connection string, Azure Web Storage. These all settings have been updated to Azure Function. So let's go over to Azure Function over here, function app, and basically let's hit refresh. Currently you see only 4 settings, and function runtime, it is showing as node. Let's see what it does. Hit refresh, and now it added Azure Web Storage, storage connection string, and it might have updated this function worker runtime. So I don't see any issues with this. So this is good. Version 18. Website run from package. Actually, we don't need this option. We'll see if it throws the error. We'll be doing the zip deploy later on. But now let's see if our function app has been deployed successfully and if we are able to access it or not. Okay, so we'll go to overview page, okay, and scroll down. It says generate QR code over here, right? Let me click on that and hit code plus test. Okay, and then hit test run. Maybe I'll just close the terminal now. We don't need it. Alright, so over here you can use Postman or any other client to execute the API call. I'll be using the inbuilt that's there within Azure portal. So let's choose the HTTP method. Let's use the default key. Let's add the query URL, and over here you can add the, let me add the community. Over here you can add the URL for which you would like to generate the QR code. So let me add our community website over here, the CloudOps community.org. Right, and that should be good, and then hit run. Okay, it is throwing the error which says public access is not permitted on the storage account. So we missed one step, and that is why it is showing the error that your storage account is not public. Your Azure function is not able to write the file and access the file to and from storage account. So let's go to our storage account. It's over here, and if you scroll down to configuration, and over here it says allow storage account key access. This one, this should be enabled, plus allow blob anonymous access. So this should also be enabled. Click on that and hit save. Okay, now that we have made the changes, let's go ahead and execute this again. Run. Maybe it will take a few seconds to execute or to make the changes. Yeah, it says settings may take up to 30 seconds to take effect. Let's run again. Okay, still not. Okay, I should wait for 30 seconds. All right. So after 30 seconds has been passed, after the changes have been reflected, it says HTTP code is 200. And here is our QR code. Basically, this function app, it generated a PNG. And this PNG has been uploaded to the same blob storage account. So if we copy that, and because it has anonymous read access, so if I open this in a new tab, it will download the PNG. Let's download it and now hit open it. Okay, here is our QR code. And if you want, I can show you if it opens our website or not. So let me scan it. Right, and it should open this. I hope you are able to see this. So yes, it worked. It worked like a charm. Now our first part is completed, which is showing the Azure web app. How do we create it? And then how do we publish the changes to Azure with the help of CLI tool? Now, the reason why you all are here, will be doing that with Azure DevOps. Right? So we'll keep this app running and we'll make the changes, and the settings that we have published will also see how we can securely include that within the Azure DevOps pipeline. Right? So I'm gonna open the Azure portal, dev.azure.com for Azure DevOps. I'm gonna create a new project which says Day-13 serverless. Okay, hit create. Okay, and then I'll go to pipelines. I'll create a new pipeline, and Azure repos git says no matching repository was found because we have not imported the repo yet. So let's go to the repo first and hit import. I basically have to import this repository by 𝗏𝗏. Let's just copy this one. Okay, and over here, hit import. Okay, the repository has been successfully imported. I see all the files. It just does not have that local settings.json. That will I'll show you how do we take care of it later on. Okay, let's go to Azure pipeline now. Okay, hit create a new pipeline, Azure repos git, and now we have a repository. You can select Node.js function app, this option, or you can create it from the scratch. We have already seen all the steps in the previous videos, so I'm not gonna explain that again. But I will explain this one, the one that we are importing. So let's click on this. Okay, select your subscription. So basically this will create an environment variable with the subscription ID as well as a service connection. So click on that. Let's Okay, now select your function app. It does not show you anything. So let's click on validate and configure, and we'll update it later on. Okay, so here's our pipeline. Here is our subscription environment variable. Function app name is basically null at the moment, so we'll see that. There are two stages basically. First is build and the next one is deploy. Here's the build stage. In build stage, you see it has a job with the name build. Display name is also build, and it is using the Microsoft hosted agent pool with the name VM image, which is basically over here as an environment variable, Ubuntu latest. Yeah, so I just remembered one more thing. So, I have used Azure App Service Plan for this demo, and because there was some limitation with the serverless consumption plan. So to overcome that limitation, you can also use self-hosted agent. In video 8 of this series, I have explained everything about self-hosted agent. So if you use that, you can basically add more storage to your agent and you won't hit that limitation. So just to be sure. All right. So as I was explaining, first job is a build job, which has this a step to install the Node.js tool, right? So it will install Node.js, this task. You click on that, you can specify the Node.js version, or you can always check for the latest version if you want. So that's been added already. Then this is for the .NET build, and we definitely don't need this. So let me just remove this script. The next one is npm install to install all the binaries, and then npm run build if present, but we don't have npm build or test command, so this will be skipped. Npm install will install all the dependencies. Then we have archive files, because the build that it will create, it will have node modules folder with all the dependency. It will create a zip folder out of all the files, right? So we need that. All right. This will be from the default working directory, and archive type will be zip, and archive file name will be the name of your build ID. So it will be taking reference from your build, and the environment variable will be build ID. So for example, if build number 170 will be created out of this, so the zip name will be inside this folder. The build name will be 170.zip, and it will replace any existing archive if it's there. Then we'll be uploading this to a location with the name drop. So drop will be the folder, and inside that folder there'll be 170.zip or whatever the build number is. Okay, so let's have a look at the folder once again. So if you go to the repository QR code, so it has two applications. One is this one, QR code generator, which is what we are deploying. The other one is a web app. So web app, Rishabh recently added this after we recorded the video. So this one, Rishabh recently added it. I haven't got the chance to test it. So we'll be focusing on this one for now, QR code generator. But files of this particular application are there inside a subfolder, right? So we need to make some adjustment to our pipeline because it's there inside this generate QR code, these two files, right? Index.js and function.json. So we'll be copying those two files inside this folder, so that it will take care of this. Plus we'll be archiving this particular folder instead of the root folder. So for that, let's go to our pipeline, and where we are archiving the files. Okay, so we were archiving it over here from system.default working directory. Inside that, we'll add the folder name, the subfolder, which is QR code generator, right? And similarly over here as well, in the archive directory name, QR code generator. Okay, I hope I have spelled it right. Okay, And before that, we'll add one more step. Let's add it over here. One more task. Click on Show Assistant and search for copy files. So source folder is this content star, and the target folder should be one directory back. So I'll just remove the last subfolder. And it should be before archiving. So I'll just keep the cursor over here and hit add. Okay. So copy files task has been added, and we have archive files with the subfolder name as well. And then while uploading the artifact as well, it should be artifact staging directory, and then QR code generator, and then the build ID. Okay. Then we have the next stage, which is deployment, right? So stage name is deploy, and then depends on build. That means this stage is dependent on the build stage to be succeeded, because succeeded is the condition. If it fails, if the previous stage fails, this will not be executed. Then it has a job which says deploy. And again, it is using the Microsoft hosted agent. Strategy is run once. It should be only executed one. Then we have the Azure Function app task. So click on that, and let's select Azure Service Connection. And then we have Azure Function on Windows. Select the function app name. Okay, now it is visible over here. So you can select this app, or you can use the environment variable. Both are fine. Then we have a package or folder. So it should be pipeline workspace, drop, and then build.build ID. So this is where we have uploaded the artifacts. Okay, and then click on additional deployment option. Make sure you choose zip deploy. Auto detect has some issues. So click on add, and I believe there are some changes since last version of Azure Function task, this one. So what I'll do is I'll just remove this one, and I'll create a new task. So it should be Azure Function task 2. So let's show assistant again and search for function. Azure Functions deploy, this one. Search the service connection. App type should be function app on Windows. Function name, this one, or you can use the environment variable. And update the package or folder location. So pipeline workspace, drop, and then the zip name. So I'll just quickly add that. All right. And then deployment method should be zip deploy. So now if you add it, you will see now it is Azure Function app 2 instead of Azure Function app 1. So this should be the correct one. All right, now let's see if we need any more details. Okay, so let's add the function app name over here as well. Because in the beginning it was not showing the app. I'm not sure the reason for that, but it is showing now. So we are good. Function app name is this. Let's use the same as the environment name. And wherever we have used function app name, you can use the environment variable. I believe this is only in the deploy stage. It should be over here. App name. Then all right, this should be good. We have added all the details, I believe. Okay, let's hit save and run. And it has 2 stages, so it will take a few minutes. I'm gonna pause the recording and then we'll come back. Okay, so it failed. This time it says no such file or directory for, okay, so it's not able to find package.json. See over here, it is failing for this file. Let's see from where we are running npm install. Okay, let's go. Let me open this pipeline in a new tab. Okay, hit edit, and here is our npm install command. So it's running in the default workspace or the default staging directory where we have done the git checkout, right? But our application was there in a different folder. It was there inside this folder, generate QR code. But our application was there inside this particular folder. I'm just gonna copy this, and before npm install or inside the same script, I'll just add one cd statement to change that directory to this directory and then run npm install. Right now, let's hit validate and save. It should trigger the pipeline. Let's see. Okay, it was failed in this step, install node.js. Now it's been, oh no, this one, prepare binaries. And this time it succeeded, but there is a different error. It should not have succeeded. It's some sort of bug with Azure DevOps, because we clearly see the exit status 1 and unexpected token dot. There is a syntax error somewhere in the pipeline. Okay, let's go back. Click edit. Maybe yeah, I shouldn't have used this one. This should succeed this time. At least this particular stage shouldn't fail. And by the way, because last stage did not produce any artifact, so the deployment was not triggered. Okay, let's see. It is failing again, so let me troubleshoot this a bit. It is failing. So looks like it's not able to install the dependencies with npm install. Let's go back to the pipeline, and I believe this is due to the fact that we are using an older version. So let's install version 18.x, and we'll add one more variable to enable the debug logs. So for that, if you remember the previous video, it should be system.debug. This should be true, and this will spit out all the debug logs for this particular run or any pipeline run. And you can remove the variable whenever you are okay with that. Validate. And okay, let's go to pipelines. Build stage, and let's see if it passes the step of prepare binaries. It looks like it is working now. I'm going to pause the recording till the deployment gets completed. Right after a few minutes, the build and deployment has been completed. I don't see any error, although there are a lot of logs because we have enabled the debug option, if you remember. But it says the application has been deployed, and here's the URL. But we can check from the console itself. Go back over here, let's hit refresh, and let's do test and run again, just to make sure if it is working now as well. So let's add the parameter URL and hit run. Okay, it is generating the QR code. It is working absolutely fine. So we have already seen all the steps has been completed, and we were able to test the changes as well from the portal. So you can make any changes to the application itself and see if it works for you. Now the important step, please do not forget to do that. This is really important. Go to your Azure portal and go to your resource group and delete the entire resource group, so that all the resources that we have provisioned should be deleted after this demo. So just click on delete resource group, copy the resource group name and paste it over here and hit delete. And this should delete all your resources, else you will be incurred a huge cost of running the app service plan, and maybe a few costs for Azure storage. But if you are following till here, you should be deleting it after you have completed the demo. Alright, thank you so much for watching the video. I hope you have learned a lot of things with this video. And once again, thank you 𝗏𝗏 for the amazing application and giving us your time, showing the demo and sharing valuable knowledge and resources with us. So all the links, all the repositories, everything will be there in the description section. So do check that out. And if you are new here, don't forget to subscribe the channel. And if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. And I will see you soon with the next video, and I'm planning to complete this entire series in next 7 to 10 days. So stay tuned with me. I am almost done recording the rest of the 3 videos. So after that, we'll start a new series. So stay tuned for that as well. And I will see you soon. Happy learning, and thank you so much for watching.